Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to this video and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the top 5 best things about the new DJI FPV drone. This is part 1 of a 2-part series. In the second part of this, I'm going to be going over the top 5 worst things about the drone. So if you're someone who's considering buying it, make sure that you check out that one as well. But without further ado, let's hop straight into it. And number 1, my favorite thing about this drone is the clarity in the goggles while you're flying. When I started flying FPV drones, actually with this drone back here was my first one. So this is the first drone that I started flying, and basically this camera right here is an analog camera. So it transmitted the footage to my Fat Shark goggles, and the footage is like, it basically looks like a TV from the 1970s. It's super blurry, it has like static lines going through it, and really it was hard to fly just because you legit couldn't see anything, especially when you were like in between like hills or rocks or whatever. The footage was just not good. Now things have come a super long way from this setup to this setup, but in between was the DJI FPV system, which coming from this drone was already a massive improvement. The DJI FPV system is still what I fly today in all my quads except for the DJI FPV, and it's still amazing. It's like literally going from the 1970s to an HD TV. It was incredible. I honestly didn't think it could get that much better, but with OcuSync 3.0, it did get that much better. It's a huge jump from the FPV system. And random side note, when I refer to the DJI FPV system, I mean the traditional FPV drones that I fly, which is basically the camera, the goggles, and the controller that DJI makes. And the DJI FPV drone is this guy right here. But it just makes flying the drone so much more fun because you're so much more immersed. Coming from analog, it's just like an entirely different world. It's so clear that sometimes I get woozy from flying just because I'm like so immersed in what's going on that I just do a flip or something and I'm just like, holy shit. What I'm really hoping is that they make OcuSync 3.0 compatible with the next generation of air units that they make, so we can get this kind of video quality in the goggles and everything built into other FPV quads. Alright, so hopping into number 2 is the post-processing workflow of this drone. So this right here is the drone that I fly most often and is the Nazgul 5. You can see in here, that is the DJI FPV system, and it hooks up to the goggles and controller. But typically what I do is I fly this drone and I mount this GoPro on top of it. And before I fly, I hit record on the GoPro, fly around for 4 or 5 minutes, and then when I land, turn it off. From there, what I have to do is I take that footage, put it through a program called RealSteady, and then I finally have that footage on my SD card. But with the DJI FPV, you can just fly, you can start and stop recording whenever you want, and with Rocksteady, the stabilization is already built into the drone. So the file that you first record, you can just take straight out, and it's already on your SD card, you can put it right into your editing platform. That being said, the stabilization isn't that good, and you have to fly really, really smooth to get any decent looking footage. But that opens up possibilities for Rocksteady to get better, so in the future, like in different iterations of the FPV drones, you might have perfectly stable footage right off the SD card. If dreams really do come true, I wish GoPro/RealSteady could collaborate with DJI and just make the ultimate FPV drone. Alright, so number 3 is the range. The range is super solid. I've gotten close to 2 miles with this drone, which is roughly like 10,500 feet. I know people will say you can get that type of range with Crossfire or some ground stations, but just like I said, for what it is, it's really, really solid. You can pretty much fly as far as you want. I think a lot of the limiting factor of the range is the battery, and also I've found through objects, the connection is still really good. This normal drone that I fly, the range is super solid, but I definitely think the DJI FPV drone is better. So again, if we can just get an air unit with OcuSync 3.0, that would be perfect. The other thing that makes this drone really easy to go long distances is the return to home feature. So with this drone, I don't have a GPS unit installed into it. So if I get out of range and I just black out and can't see anything, my drone just basically falls out of the sky, and good luck finding a drone that's that far away from yourself. With this DJI FPV drone, it'll just stop and it recognizes that it's out of range, and then it'll just fly straight back to you until you get back into range. So that is just like a huge peace of mind thing when with this drone, I typically just like wouldn't go super long distances. With the DJI FPV, I'm like, okay, fine, because I know it's just gonna return home at the end of the day. it just gives you that peace of mind to get the shots that you really want. My only problem with that is actually the height ceiling. So the highest you can fly with the drone is 500 meters. So if you're trying to do really cool ridgeline dives and stuff, you really can't do that just because the drone limits you. That's another thing that I'm talking about in the kind of negative side. But you can pretty much fly as far out as you want. So number 4 is another one of my favorite features, which is the emergency brake. So if you're ever flying your drone, having a great time, and all of a sudden you're just like shit, you can just press the emergency brake button and the drone will just stop and hover right there. This feature is definitely something new and really helpful, especially for beginner pilots. Learning FPV can be super overwhelming, and especially for your first few flights, you're almost 100% guaranteed to crash. So having the ability to just press a button and then be totally fine is really helpful. Even like if you have a successful flight when you're first learning, coming back and landing was tricky for me, so I'd like fly back and almost like 4 out of 5 times I would just get like 5 feet above the ground and then I'd be like, oh fuck, turn it off, cut the propellers, and then just crash. Which doesn't do a ton of damage to the drone, but repeated crashes definitely lead to the electronics wearing out. It also kind of feels super gangster when you're flying really fast and you're coming in and you can just like press the button and it's just like take your goggles off and land the drone. That part is really cool. So for takeoff and landing, it's super handy. All right, the final thing that I will say about this drone is my absolute favorite part, and that is that it just flies. Debatably, the hardest thing about getting into FPV is just getting a drone in the air. There's usually a massive learning curve when you first get into FPV. First, you need to get a simulator, get a controller, and then you need to practice in the simulator a bunch. Then there's a million different frames, controllers, ESCs, goggles, all that gear that you need to wade through to find the best gear, and that can be insanely overwhelming. Then on top of that, if you don't buy a pre-built one, you need to actually figure out how to solder and build your own drone. On top of that, you need to take it into a program called Betaflight and program it, and then you finally might, maybe, potentially have a drone that flies. But probably not. Like this drone over here, it took me so long to finally get it in the air. I did all the steps, I built it, I did all the soldering, I tried it, and it just didn't work at all. So like 5 more run-throughs of that, then I finally got it in the air. Only to see it fall from like 300 feet in the air, just a slow death where I couldn't control anything and the battery had died. Just like, straight into my neighbor's yard. You can get around this by buying ready-to-fly setups and then using the DJI FPV system. They actually do a really good job of making these systems pretty user-friendly, but even that usability doesn't really get close to how user-friendly the DJI FPV drone is. DJI is just so good at making products that are user-friendly and easy to use. Besides a few quick steps, you can pretty much get this drone up in the air within like 20 to 30 minutes after buying it and opening the box. I cannot tell you how much time I've spent over the past couple years troubleshooting quads. And it seems to always happen in the times that's like the least convenient. During big shoots or something, randomly the drone just won't arm or something, or when you're trying to catch a sunset, something just isn't working. So it's insanely frustrating, and having a drone that you're just like 100% sure it's just gonna work is a huge peace of mind. For example, on our last road trip from Colorado out to LA in the van, we stopped at this really sick spot. The sun was going down, everyone was in a hurry to get to the next spot to shoot sunset, and I was like, all right guys, just 5 minutes, just let me just do this big dive of this rock face. And we got there, pulled out, and I like got everything ready and just like armed the drone, and nothing happened. And then I just like tried arming it again, unplugged it, plugged it back in, did all this stuff, and it just wouldn't work. So eventually, after like 15 minutes of trying to troubleshoot it, I was just like, whatever, I'll figure it out later, and then had to figure it out at the hotel room. But like I said, DJI FPV, you can just grab it and go. So that right there is the biggest reason why I really like this drone. It's a drone that just flies. Alright guys, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a better picture on whether or not you want to buy this drone. Like I said, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. In the next one, I'll be going over the top 5 worst parts about the drone, so just make sure you watch both of them to get a better understanding of the positives and negative aspects of this drone. This really is a solid drone. It's kind of hard coming from this drone because I've just been flying it for so long, but there are a lot of good things about this drone. In the next video, like I said, I'm getting into my top 5 least favorite things, but overall I think DJI did a decent job with it, and I'm really excited to see what they come out with in the future. If you guys like this video, it would help me so much if you hit that like button down below. But anyways, that is it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Peace.